It's interesting you said about going up the mountain and coming back down. It's always important to remember that the summit's only halfway.
Yes.
So you need to be able to get back safely.
Yeah.
And make sure you have enough energy left to also make the descent back safely without running into troubles. So yeah, I think it's great guidance for people who are starting out, who are really keen to get to the summit, but then you kind of realize the summit's really only halfway, and you've got to get back down safely.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So cool. What's your view on the current situation with Everest? Now, obviously, every year we see all these pics now of long queues on Everest. What can we do to make it better for the world's highest peak?
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? It's a really difficult subject, because Everest is a victim of its own success. Just like this used to be a quiet little village, and then they opened a ski resort, and it became like a zoo. It gets so successful. All these little Chamonix in France is the same. It used to be a nice little village. It's famous for climbing. Everybody goes. They build a few ski toes, and they agreed to midi cable car. More and more people coming, and then all of a sudden Chamonix becomes a bit of a zoo as well. It's just part of like Mont Blanc. There's hundreds of people every day going up Mont Blanc.
Yeah.
And it's really not it's an enjoyable experience still, but it's a difficult experience. You don't get away. Like, look at yesterday, we had that climb all to ourselves. We saw some people at the beginning, we saw some people at the end, but while we're on the climb, we had it all to ourselves. It was just a beautiful, peaceful experience. And we could just get to know each other and be at one with the mountain. Whereas you go to Mont Blanc, or you go to Mount Everest, or you go to any high, Grand Paradiso, all the high peaks are really, really busy now. They're just a victim of their own success, and I don't know how we deal with it. I really don't know. I can't imagine. I've guided Mount Everest, and when I did it, that was just in 2001, we summited Mount Everest by the normal route from Nepal, and we didn't have to queue at all. We were some of the first people in the mountains. I even helped to fix the ropes between the south summit and the main summit over the Hillary Step and everything, and we had the mountain not to ourselves, but we're the first in the line. And there was only maybe 50 or 60 people there. Whereas now it's hundreds and hundreds of people. How they can stand there in a down suit with oxygen as well, and they're using oxygen as well, so that your bottle's only this size and it's going to expire. So you're standing in a queue. You must be so frustrating and so frightened that, well, what happens if I run out of oxygen? Or these guys better hurry up in front of me because they're slowing me down. It must be so difficult. But I can totally understand why people still want to go. If you hear the mountains and you want to go, you have to go. It's important that you go. So I don't know how to fix it. I really don't know how they're going to fix it. They've just put up the price.
Yes.
What's it called? The peak fee. Now it's $20,000 per person. So that's going to take it down a lot of people. But unfortunately, it's only the wealthy people who's going to be climbing Everest. So that's also a bit of a problem, because it's not shared up amongst all levels of society, and mountaineering is not really about, the wealthy people can climb, but the poor people can't. Poor people can't.
Do you think, in addition to just putting up the price of the permits, but like you say, that's probably biasing it towards people who have the money. Do you think, in addition to that, or in place of that, people should be asked to prove or demonstrate some ascents or some other peaks that they've done in order to be able to qualify to make the attempt to climb Everest? Do you think something like that would work? Because you see a lot of newcomers on...
Yeah, but I think they're doing that already now. Did that not come in a few years ago, that you've got to have done several other peaks before you go on to Mount Everest? I don't actually believe in that at all. I think if somebody's got the passion and the desire in their heart, and you really want to climb it, then you will climb other peaks to get the skills to go. I don't believe it. I don't like what's happening just now. Like they're not really mountain guides. They call themselves mountain guides, but they're not IFMGA mountain guides. But they're putting people into tents and little chambers, what's it called? The hyperbaric chambers. And people are acclimatizing in London, say, or in New York, and then they fly out and then they climb the mountain in 2 weeks or something. I really don't believe in that. I think it's total cheating and it's not natural. But people are doing it and they're paying for it, and apparently they're enjoying it.
Right.
But really they're just going to pick the summit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I really don't agree with that. I think if you want to go climbing, I think it's okay. If you want to, I suppose if that floats your boat, it's okay. Mm-hmm. But it's not what would float my boat. That's all. I'm not saying it's wrong, I just don't like it.
Good. Well, one of the things that helped me the most, especially when I go on some of the mountaineering trips, is apart from seeing all the glaciers that are receding, for example, in the Alps, you also see some of our more classic mountains just crumbling. Some of the classic routes are just so dangerous now due to rockfall and all of that. And in general, you could see things are changing, right? The planet's changing. Like even the Scottish winter here, it's not really what it used to be a few years ago, right? So the planet's definitely changing. But what do you think our responsibilities should be? What can people do in their day-to-day lives to give a bit more attention to these changes and make a difference?
I think again, that's a really, really difficult question. And I think we're also individual and small, but really we can't do much. Mm-hmm. We've got to rely on the governments and the President of the United States and all our governments to look after the planet. Mm-hmm. And we really should be voting for people that will look after the planet. But it's most debatable, like the argument about our electric cars actually do they use less carbon than petrol cars, etc. All that sort of stuff, and the mining for exotic metals for the batteries, etc. And then now they're talking about going undersea and mining, and that's really destructive as well. So I don't think there's an easy solution. Mm-hmm. But I think we've all just got to do our own little thing. Like if you can cycle to work, I think like as an individual, what can we do? And it's really, really difficult. And I know people with kids. I've got lots of, I used to have children myself and, but they're a bit older, but especially now, a lot of the children, they're just terrified of what's happening with the environment, and they're quite right. And they say to their parents, hey, what can we do about it? Mm-hmm. But there's actually very little you can do. Yeah. And of course, you're still entitled to live your life. I think humans have always been adventurers and you want to explore, even if it's just, like you driving, you taking the train up here to Aviemore to go climbing. I think it's super that you want to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think as humans, we should be allowed to travel and do things. Mm-hmm. I don't want some government coming in and say, we're not allowed to travel anymore, or you're only allowed, if you do have a car, you're only allowed to drive 6,000 miles a year or something. Yeah. I think that would be terrible if that happened. But we've got to find some sort of ways. And I think that's what, as individuals, what we can do is just, instead of taking the car to the shop, we can walk to the shop, we can recycle, just things like that. Take a bicycle when you can take the bicycle. Yeah.
It's the small things.
I think that's all we can do as individuals. Yeah. And then think in the bigger picture is, if there are governments who are greener, but they're genuinely green. Mm-hmm. This is a problem we have as well, especially in Scotland just now. We've got a Green Party and the SNP and they keep fighting each other. And then the Green Party come up with some crazy idea. Mm-hmm. And it really is just over the top crazy. Yeah. There's no way that humans can interact with that. Yeah. So there's so much politics involved just now, it's hard to get a clear picture. But if there was actually a Green Party who were truly green and not fighting all the politics, then we probably, all us outdoor types, I think we'd vote for a Green Party if they were actually green. Yeah. The problem is that you don't know what any of them are. Yeah.
It's just they get lost in, like you say, fighting other bits rather than focus on the things that matter, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But that's a problem worldwide. Yes. So I don't know what we do. It's a real big issue. Mm-hmm. But I know I've travelled all my life. I'm 69 years old now. It's easy for me to say, oh, maybe I should stop going to Alps or, stop travelling back and forth so much. I must admit, for myself, like I used to fly back and forth to Chamonix, to Geneva, Edinburgh, Geneva. It's easy. There's this company, EasyJet. They do really cheap flights. So I used to fly back and forth all the time. I've stopped that now and I'll go out and I'll stay for a longer period and then come home again, or I'll use public transport and try not to use aeroplanes so much. So I've probably cut my own flights by about 50%, which is a big, in a way it's a big saving. But actually I know at the same time, those flights are still flying, whether I'm on them or not. because there's just so many of us in this world, in this amazing world, you know, and we're all God's children, and we're all got a right to be here. We're here for a reason. It's just finding out what do we do with our energy to help everybody.
Absolutely. From your experience, what makes mountaineering such a transformative activity for your physical well-being and for your mind? What is it about being in the mountains?
Well, I think it's only for mountaineers. Like, if you don't like mountains, it's not transformation. It's transformative at all. I think that's important to say. Like, you can get a thrill by going on a mountain bike, for example, or, you know, like some people, it's reading a book. They go into this space in their head, and it's just, I think for me, it's the peace that I get. Like, for me personally, it gives me a really nice feeling of peace and serenity inside.
Right.
And that's one of the things, especially after Nanga. When you're a mountain guide, it's really interesting. When you're a mountain guide, you know, people say to you, have you climbed Everest? You know, you're a young mountain guide and you haven't climbed it yet. And you go, no, I've not climbed it. And you almost think society's saying, oh, you've not climbed Everest, you can't be a very good mountaineer. Even although you've climbed the North Face and all these super routes, like, you know, going back to that question about, you know, is the Mazeno the biggest thing you've done? You know, you do things like the North Face, the Eiger, or the Walker Spur, you know, fantastic, really, really hard climbs, or, you know, the first grade eight climbs in Scotland. Myself and Andy Nisbet did that when we were, you know, so it was a big deal at the time, and these are really important climbs. But it's actually the serenity and peace that you get from it. And I remember after Nanga Parbat, after climbing Everest, you know, people would say, hey, Sandy, have you climbed Everest? Yeah, of course I have. You know, and you kind of dismiss it, you know, throw it away, dead casual. And I suppose I do the same in Nanga Parbat. But inside, you've got this peace that's coming through your body, and you can get that through many ways. For me, I've found it via mountaineering.
Right.
So I think I'd recommend it. You know, I recommend mountaineering to just walking in the hills, walking in nature, being in amongst the trees, and big forests, you know, with big trees and everything. It's just very calming. Or even walking through a big desert and the plains of Tibet and everything. You know, it just brings you a calmness, isn't it?
So what would you say to someone who feels, well, somebody who's never done mountaineering but feels really intimidated by it? Because I think with mountaineering, people see different videos and social media, just look at stuff and they kind of there's a fear of the whole physicality of it. There's a fear of heights, there's a fear of exposure and having to contend with bad weather conditions. So there's a lot of things somebody who's new to mountaineering or wants to get on the mountaineering journey can feel intimidated by. Right? So what do you think is the best place for them to start? How do you start in this sport?
Well, I think it's really good nowadays because they've got climbing walls. Like in London, where you're from, now there's just bouldering gyms and climbing walls appearing everywhere. And they're really, really good. And I think that's a really good place to start. You know, even as a little kid, because I think mountaineering teaches you a lot. So, you know, mountaineering gyms and climbing is really good. I think it's really worth getting a good instructor or somebody at the gym, you know, that do these courses teaching kids how to belay and how to communicate with each other and everything. I think that's really important. And then just going walk, like myself, who just went walking, and then I was lucky I found people to climb with who were good climbers. So if you can attach yourself to, you know, you don't have to use professionals all the time. You can just be your friends and just take one step at a time. And as you start walking, like low level walking, and you think, oh, well, I'll try some of the bigger hills in the summertime. And then you might learn to navigate and decide, oh, I'll go winter hill walking. And then you just work it up like that. Like my own story was I wasn't really into, I used to walk in the hills all the time, but I wasn't a climber at all. And I remember as a kid, about 16 years old, or 12 years old, driving, you know, my father would take us out to Sunday runs in the car, you know, he'd all drive about and the kids would be in the back, and that was a big event. And I remember seeing rock climbers and I just said, God, they're absolutely crazy, what are they doing that for? And now that's how I make my living, taking people rock climbing. So, you know, I just learned about it. And, you know, I was lucky I met people who could show me the ropes. And, you know, that really helps. But you can do that with professionals. But you don't have to do it with... there's something really super about amateur mountaineering and the way that mountaineering's developed especially in the UK. You know, in the Alps, it's this... Certainly in Europe, people just, hire a guide if you go climbing. And even the guides over there, they're very, very good and they're very professional, but they don't even teach you how to tie a figure of 8 knot. They just tie you on and they give you a tag. And next thing you're climbing a North Face that year. If you say you want to climb, they'll get you up it. Whether you enjoy it or not is different. Whereas if you go with a British guide or a British instructor, they're more about instructing you how to climb and how to tie all your knots so that you can actually build up yourself, because we don't want you climbing with us all the time.
Yes.
Whereas Europe, it's a kind of this closed market. You climb with a guide and you always climb with a guide. So there is a difference, and these are differences that are important, I think. I think it's important. I really like the whole idea of amateur climbers, and that's what I like about the British climbing scene in the Himalayas. It's not always mountain guides. We just happen to be mountain guides. Rick wasn't a mountain guide, for example. And, he climbed big, big things. So amateur mountaineering and that whole attitude to that amateur way is really nice as well. It's really important.
Yeah. So one of the things is the fear of heights. So one of the things that people who, at least on some of the Couch to Summit trips, people are like, I really have a fear of heights. So is there going to be a lot of like exposure on the routes that we are planning to do? What's your view on how best to tackle that? Because it's a fear that you kind of have to overcome.
I don't know. I've had my personal experience of that. Because when I got into mountaineering climbing here in the UK, and I decided I really wanted to go to the Alps. So one of my friends who still lives around this area, we signed up on a course. It was a kind of cowboy course in the Alps, but in those days you didn't have to use them. It was kind of grey area, do you use guides or do you not? And it was this British company offering really cheap courses, so that's all I could afford. So I went on this course. And then, they took us up to the Aiguille du Midi and we had to walk down the Alps in the summer. And, if you ski it in the winter, it's easy because they cut a special path. But in the summer, it's just a really sharp ridge. And it's really scary. And I actually wouldn't, this is a guy who's got a peely door now. But, my first time down there, I got just a few meters down and I said, I can't go down here, I've got to go back. I was petrified. And then the guy took me back. He wasn't a qualified guide, who's an amateur person pretending to be a guide, and he talked to me and stuff, and all the other people in the course, they walked down with their leaders, instructors, and then eventually I had to come on, you can go now. I'd woken up a bit, I'd had another cup of coffee or whatever, and he was really nice, and he explained how it all worked, and I went down and I was a little bit frightened, but I just got over it myself. And I think the important thing is to have somebody with you that you can really rely on. And that might be a guide, but it might be just a really, really good friend who's got experience. And just do little things at a time and just build up that exposure to heights. Like I work in industrial rope access industry, and they were working on big cooling towers and high-rise buildings and hydroelectric dams and bridges. Sometimes you go up to the top of these big suspension bridges and have to change your light bulbs and things. And sometimes you go up there even as a very experienced work at height person and a mountaineer, and you pop out the top of this thing and all of a sudden you're just such and you've really got to calm yourself. You've got to take your emotions and go, you can do this. I have to do it quite often. I think it's good to have that healthy respect for heights. It's natural.
Yes.
And then you've got to, use your reason to go, of course I can do this. I've done it before, climb that step ladder or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think you've got to manage your emotions. And I think a big part of climbing is managing your emotions.
Absolutely. So it's about moving it from fear to respect of the situation.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
And understanding that you actually have the skills to do it as well.
Yeah. I think that with the midi one, I was absolutely terrified of it as well, because we had to go down to get back up the Cosmics Ridge. And I was with Dale, and I looked at it, I'm like, I'm not going down there. But then, I had Neil was great, and like you said, I had a person who really knew how to do it and guide me through it, and we went down and had a great time at the Cosmics. So I think it's just learning to deal with the fear, and then eventually it's not fear anymore, but you have respect for it.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah. That's a term I use a lot. I've got a respect for heights.
Yes.
A really big respect. I think it's really important to have that.
Yes. Good. Right. So if you give one piece of advice to someone standing on the edge of their first big challenge, whether that's a mountaineering challenge or a challenge in life, what would that be? So, like for example, I was last year stood at the bottom of the Pittsburgh Hill, North Ridge. I woke up at 4 a.m. I looked at it and I'm like, can I really do this? Because I had done a lot of climbing before, but it's still quite intimidating to stand at the bottom of the route, a really long route that you can actually see before your eyes. What would be your advice in those situations? Like it's not just a mountain, right? It could be anyone facing a stiff challenge in their lives. What would your advice be in those situations?
Well, I think it's stay cool and take some deep breaths and really think about it, isn't it? Like we've all been in those situations, or we've even been on big climbs.
Yeah.
You know, there's some of these big alpine walls, and you're climbing maybe something new or something that's well established, but you're on the bivouac. You know, you get some spindrift in the morning. You wake up, your sleeping bag's all covered in snow and stuff, and you're going, who's going to lead the first pitch in the morning? And neither of you want to do it.
Yeah.
But one of you has to, and eventually somebody goes, oh, I'll do it.
Yeah.
You get keen. But you've always got to compose yourself, haven't you? And just take a few deep breaths and go, well, we're here for a reason. And what's the options? You've either got to abseil all the way down, or you've got to keep getting to the top, and then it's usually easier to get off the other side of the mountain. So I think just staying cool and believing in yourself. And this thing, hope, you know, having hope and belief that you're going to be okay, and you know, trust your own skills,
right,
etc. You know, I think that's really important.
Nice. Well, so getting towards the end of this episode now, well, I have some quick fire ones to finish this one off. Do you have a mountain you want to go back to every day? Is that a comfort mountain for you?
Well, I love Scotland, and possibly the Cairngorms.
Right. Okay.
I don't really have a favourite mountain. Like some people say, oh, Nanga Parbat must be my favourite mountain, but not really. I just love being in the mountains. But a big part of me is the people that you're with as well. That's why guiding's so nice, because you meet different people all the time, and almost every single person. I don't think ever in my guiding career we've had somebody come up that you actually don't like.
Yeah.
You know, there's almost this connection. Yeah. And that's really, really nice. But yeah, Cairngorms for me. I love Scotland.
Perfect. Summer mountaineering or winter mountaineering?
Proper winter would be good. Like Scotland used to be a fantastic place for winter climbing, and when we get cool, clear, you know, blue skies, or you know, still skies, starry nights, and really good weather and good climbing conditions, there's nothing to beat it. Scotland's the best. So winter climbing would be my favourite. But I am now getting into more and more into rock climbing. You know, nice sunny rock, nice dry sunny rock is good as well. But I prefer winter.
Winter. All right. Yeah, I thought you would say that. Tea or coffee at base camp?
Coffee in the morning, tea in the afternoon.
Brilliant. Right, well, tell us about your book. So, what is it called? Where can people buy your book?
Oh, well, I've got a copy here to show you. In fact, I can. This is out in paperback now. This is my book, In Some Lost Place, the 5% of Nanga Parbat, the Mazeno Ridge. It's it did come out in hardback at first. It's published by Vertebrate Publishing. Right. Vertebrate Publishing. I wanted to write a book. I'd never written a book before, so when I came back from Nanga Parbat, it was a really good story. It is a good story. So that's my book there. Yeah. And it came out, it happened. I had the self-discipline to get up early every morning and spend some time writing it. Yeah. And it's edited by a chap, Ed Douglas. And it's really interesting. Have you ever written anything like that, like a book or anything?
No, I don't have the patience.
It's really amazing. Well, that's what I thought too. But I decided I was going to write one, and it was really interesting because, you know, you get a publisher. I was fortunate to have a publisher, Vertebrate Publishing. They do a lot of the climbing books in the UK. And I kept sending, you know, I'd write a section, I'd send it down and say, what do you think? Oh, Sandy, we're not even looking at it, they'd say. We're going to wait till you get the whole thing, then we'll look at it. All right. So I kept sending it down. I did 3 big manuscripts, you know, sections of the book. I kind of wrote it in 3, sent it down, and eventually they said, oh, we're going to read it. By the way, we've got Ed to be Ed, who's now quite a good friend, I'd say. He's going to be your editor. So then eventually they gave me his phone number, and I knew Ed from years because he's quite a famous climber and a very good editor, and written his own books as well. phoned him up, and it was really, that was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It was like standing naked in front of your first girlfriend or something, and you're going, oh, I wonder what she thinks. Like it was like that. You feel really exposed, and of course Ed went, Sandy, actually, it's really good. I've had to put a red pen through one or two sections, and some of it needs jiggling around. But basically, it's very good. He was pleasantly surprised, So that was great. But it's a really big thing to do, and you're really if you've never written before, you're putting a lot of your feelings down on paper.
Yeah.
So you're kind of exposing yourself, and so you're wondering, well, what do people think of that, or what does my editor think of that? Have I written stuff? It's totally. But it's quite an interesting book. This book it's not full of romantic twaddle sort of thing. Like I'd like to write a book about mountaineering and everything that you get out of it. But with Nanga Parbat, it's kind of like a report on the first ascent. It's not written like a report, but if somebody was going to try and climb it again, they probably read that and go, oh, that's good information, etc., etc.
Yes.
So it's kind of written more in that sort of formal style, rather than just, oh, we saw a beautiful sunset tonight. I'd love to write a book about all the feelings you get when you're mountaineering, but I deliberately try to not include too much of that in that book, because I felt that people would be more interested in what's the climb about and why are you climbing it, etc.
Yes. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah,
well,
get
your hands on this
I'll
book.
sign it for you later.
Thanks, Eddie.
Yeah, please give it a big.
Yeah, get your hands on this in some lost place where you can read Sandy's first-hand experience of the Mazeno Ridge. Well, so we have time for today. Thanks a lot for your time, Sandy, and your insights. I'll see you all on the next episode. Until then, keep pushing, and I'll see you at the summit. Thank you.